Chris.
This theory seems to lay out pretty extensively what the post-revolutionary society is going to be like. And so one problem is how feasible is that going to be in a post-revolution, but also what is their actual theory towards revolution, like the actual praxis of it. I mean, it sort of seems like, oh yeah, they're going to have this voluntary army come up and liberate everybody, and then defend the revolution, if it will. Is that the general theory of it? They're sort of relying on that, or is there any sort of building up class struggle to the point of, I guess I won't say seizure of the state, but let's just say smashing the bourgeois state and then pretending like.
Yeah, I think the main area they touch on that is where they talk about. There's a section in there about like anarchist communism and anarcho-syndicalism. Basically, they just talk about first off forming the organization.
Big anarchist union.
Yeah, big anarchist union. But then they also enter into the existing labor unions and to radicalize them, and which would be, and their behavior in that would be generally coordinated by the general anarchist union. Is basically what I see as that. And I guess as that grew, then they could begin forming militias and things like that.
Okay.
So I see it.
But then let's go back to the fact that they've sort of laid out what they want their post-revolutionary society to be like. When they're saying, oh yeah, we're going to have these federated systems that are going to bridge the gap between agriculture and all those sorts of things. What happens if, for instance, they have to fight a long drawn-out civil war where most of their factory bases are destroyed and lots of people are corpse piled and can't grow food? Then sort of where do they go from there? I mean, does it sort of have, do they take into account that post-revolutionary society could just be horrifically destroyed, such as it was in Russia and it was in China?
Yeah, I think, I'm not sure that they explicitly spell out like what to do when this is when our society is like in shit. They just they basically just say, okay, these are the fundamental tenets of anarchism, and we're there's going to be things that in the interim that are going to cause the that are going to interrupt our creating of a post-revolutionary society, but we should still stick to these basic tenets, right? We should still adhere to these things. There seems to be. I mean, yeah, I guess they don't really get down to the real brass tacks of like what to do in that situation. I mean,
okay. So. All right. I guess then we'll turn to Machno. You seem to insinuate that they had this sort of what went wrong. I don't know if you ever had a chance to read the article I sent you. The article is called "Tear Them Apart and Be Done with It." The Ottoman leadership of Nestor Makhno's anti-cultural violence. And essentially, when the Tsar abdicates, there's a power vacuum, at least in the countryside, for instance, and Makhno sort of fills this power vacuum by raising up anarchists. But what it's really held together by is immense culture of violence. Makhno basically, I mean, he does. I mean, as far as being just out and out bloody, ruthless, and violent, like that's what he was. For instance, he would take enemies. And they would bring them before him, and they'd say, "I'll tear them apart and be done with it." And they would literally just mutilate these people. There's a story of him burning a priest in a boiler engine, and saying, "Now you'll burn in hell, Father," for all this or whatever. And basically, he favored like this sort of strong, predominant violence, and it sort of thrived off of it. It even tells the story of one time when he had a line of people being captured, and they were being lined up to be executed. One of the guys who's going to be executed kicks the guy who's going to execute him in the stomach, and Makhno's like, "Oh, that's pretty badass. You should join us because you're super violent." So, point being, do you think it's the case that they have to sort of, like, where do you see the failures of the anarchists there, that they have to sort of regroup and re-theorize?
Well, I mean, first off, I have not finished that article. I intend to, but I mean, I've also heard things that are kind of that. Not necessarily contradict those specific anecdotes, but ones that say that he was that a lot of times when he would capture that when he would capture people from other armies, if they were working class, that he would often like let them go and say, all right, you know, you're a fellow proletariat, you can just, we'll set you free and things like that.
Well, just real quick, do you think he makes that distinction between actual city workers, actual factory, industrial proletariat, or against like agricultural workers, like peasants?
So you're saying that he probably only did
Yeah,
that to the
I mean,
peasantry as opposed to
I'm
the
actually asking
proletariat?
you if you know that, if he does that as a distinction, because he really was not in favor of cities. He thought basically the shore proletariat was the people on the countryside.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm familiar that he wasn't a big fan of the cities. Like for instance, when like he refused to give some food to some people that were trying to like help install like some rail lines, and he just thought he's like, oh, that's like a bourgeois, you know, excess, and we don't need that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the main one of the complaints that the Bolsheviks had against him. As far as like how he treated the rural peasantry versus the urban proletariat, I'm sorry, I can't speak to that. I'm not sure.
I would ask you to finish the article, because they specifically talk about how he led like campaigns on cities, and lots of rape and murder ensued.
Okay.
So.
Well, I mean that may be the case. As he writes about it in, well, as the DLO Truder writes about it in this, I mean, it doesn't seem to be the case that they uphold that antagonism between town and country. But,
Okay.
yeah.
What do you see as this the movement, the platformism, taking shapes as of today? Like who's practicing this? Who's making it work?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff in the thing is kind of more historical and applies just to Russia. I mean, when they deal with things like the agrarian question and things like that. But as far as how it could be applied today, well, I think first off, there needs to be some sort of labor movement. I mean, that's obvious for any kind of base of any kind of organization. But also that, I mean, I don't know. I guess just like this, you would have to form an organization which was explicitly anarchist. You'd have to start using that as a, start instituting collective responsibility amongst the members of it so that you could delegate tasks, get people involved in labor unions and organizing and that sort of thing, which, I mean, seems like it's kind of a general product.
And do you see any movements taking this up today?
Oh, seeing any movements taking this up today?
Mm-hmm.
I believe there are a couple organizations that exist today that are explicitly platformist. I don't remember which ones they are, though. I think there's some in England. But anyways, yeah, unfortunately, there are a few that exist.
Okay.
Anyone else?
All right. Well, let's give Josh a hand.